my mind's going blank now. What's happening? What, I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's why it's reflected in the NHEI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him in we're going to seize the ill-begotten gains of Putin's autocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? What, I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. I don't think as the idea that political coverage of I want to thank and recognize Dr. John Kingersong. That song. I can't get this to function at all. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? What, I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. What's the song that is played where everybody is on the chair, everybody going to my mind's going blank now. What's happening? What, I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's why it's reflected in the NHEI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him in we're going to seize the ill-begotten gains of Putin's autocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? What, I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are we? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I headed? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. I don't think as the idea that
All right, so we are live, and I believe I have finally solved the technical difficulties, at least for 1 week. But we got a good show planned. There's a lot going on for all you paying attention. As you know, obviously the situation in Ukraine continues to, deteriorate more and more. And, it just seems that our leaders around the world are really pressing to go to war, and I don't want to see that happen, and I know most people don't want to see that happen, and we're hoping cooler heads will prevail. But we've got some other stuff to talk about tonight. The first thing that I really want to talk about, probably going to get me kicked off YouTube, or at least get the video taken down after, is what happened, what's going on with the vaccine, and especially after the Florida Surgeon General's report. Now in Florida, they are recommending against vaccination for anyone 18 to 39 years old, males. And this is a big story. I want to talk about this issue. I felt that this was important to discuss because this, I believe, if the truth comes out and if we are able to actually talk about it and get the word out and find out everything, all the data, this could go down as one of the biggest stories in U.S. history and in global history regarding the cover-up with what's going on with these vaccines. Not to say that all these vaccines are bad, but that they are pushing these vaccines on people without telling side effects that they know are going on. And so the Florida Surgeon General down in Florida, they did a study. The Florida Department of Health conducted analysis through a self-controlled case series, which is a technique originally developed to evaluate vaccine safety. This studied mortality risk following the mRNA COVID-19 vaccination. What did they find? This analysis found there is an 84% increase in the relative incidence of cardiac-related deaths among males 18 to 39 years old within 28 days following vaccination. They went out, they issued this, the Surgeon General posted this press release on Twitter. Twitter comes in, takes down his post because obviously Twitter knows more about the science and the safety of vaccines than a doctor, a medical doctor, a surgeon general who also has a PhD who went to Ivy League schools. And we've been hearing about this for some time now, about people having heart issues and the increased risk of myocarditis. And the media doesn't want to talk about it. Our government doesn't want to talk about it. The drug companies are not saying anything. They're still pushing out their vaccines. And the problem is it's happening to young people. And my biggest issue with this is younger, healthier men, in particular, because the data is showing that men are having increasingly more instances of myocarditis and heart attacks than women. But that's not to say women aren't dying, because if you were paying attention, a Democratic congressman's daughter, teenage daughter, she just died of heart failure after being boosted. But we are pushing these vaccines on people where there is really little to no benefit. And in some cases, people have lost their jobs if they refuse to get them. And if our government and our politicians are more concerned about continuing to get money from Big Pharma lobbyists for their campaigns than they are about protecting the lives and safety of those they represent, this could be a scandal of monumental proportions. And it has to be talked about. And Florida's not the only one who has, the Florida Department of Health are not the only ones who came up with this. In Israel, they also found a link between heart inflammation and COVID vaccination in young men. They said, following vaccination among 90% of the cases picked up in Israel appeared in men, and although myocarditis is normally more common in young men, the rate among those vaccinated was between 5 and 25 times the background rate. These are legitimate scientists finding this stuff out, okay? And they are being silenced. They are being censored by people at Twitter, okay? Someone at Twitter does not know better than Israeli scientists or the Florida Department of Health. You have big corporations, which we're going to talk about when we get into the PayPal story next, that are now deciding what is and what isn't misinformation. And it's based on political agendas and to protect, obviously right now they're trying to shield the federal government, the Biden administration, and all the people that push these vaccines, because they push these vaccines without knowing the actual risks and the problems that could arise. Because, as we found out today, if you're paying attention, in European Parliament, Pfizer admitted today that they did not test these vaccines out to see whether or not they could spread. So if you're vaccinated, there was, let's show Joe Biden here. This was one of the biggest statements that Joe Biden made. They said to us, they told us, if you're vaccinated, you cannot spread COVID-19. Let's look at Joe Biden say that to our faces. He said this. Let's watch it.
And so everybody talks about freedom and not to have a shot or have a test. Well, guess what? So how about patriotism? How about making sure that you're vaccinated so you do not spread the disease to anybody else? What about that? What's the big deal?
There you go. It's an act of patriotism to get vaccinated, because if you do it, you won't spread the disease to anyone else. That's what Joe told us. That's how he made you feel, right? You were not patriotic. You were in danger. You were a grandma killer if you didn't do it. Because if you got vaccinated, you could not spread COVID. Well, a bombshell was revealed in the European Union Parliament. Let's see what one of the members of Parliament got Pfizer to admit on the stand. Joe Biden made that statement and he knew it wasn't true. The media parroted those statements from politicians. They knew it wasn't true. The pharmaceutical companies knew that these drugs were not tested. Let's see what they found out, what they got Pfizer to admit under oath.
If you don't get vaccinated, you're antisocial. This is what the Dutch Prime Minister and Health Minister told us. You don't get vaccinated just for yourself, but also for others. You do it for all of society.
Same kind of rhetoric that Joe Biden was using.
Today,
the same in
this
Europe.
turned out to be complete nonsense. In a COVID hearing in the European Parliament, one of the Pfizer directors just admitted to me, at the time of introduction, the vaccine had never been tested on stopping the transmission of the virus. This removes the entire legal basis for the COVID passport. The COVID passport that led to massive institutional discrimination as people lost access to essential parts of society. I find this to be shocking, even criminal. Please watch the video until the end.
Voor u, mevrouw Small, heb ik de volgende vraag waar ik een duidelijk antwoord op wil. And I will speak in English so there are no misunderstandings. Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
This is scandalous. Millions of people worldwide felt forced to get vaccinated because of the myth that you do it for others.
Bombshell. So when President Biden made that statement, and all these politicians made, they later walked it back after it was just becoming too apparent, right? Because the vaccination rates kept going up and up, but people were still catching COVID. So for a while, they continued to call it a pandemic of the unvaccinated, right? But then the vaccination rates just became so high and people were still getting COVID. It just became apparent that it was a lie, that you could transmit COVID even if you were vaccinated. But they told us you couldn't. And they knew that the tests were never done. This is the thing. This is where the criminality of this began. They were making decisions and statements and forcing people to get vaccination under false pretenses when they knew what they were telling the public was not true and was not tested. And now we find out that these vaccines were never tested on human subjects. Some of these were never tested. These boosters that they're rolling out right now have never gone to human trials. They're being rushed out, and we have cardiac arrest instances skyrocketing among young people. We're talking about people that are, between 15 and 30 years old, people that are not normally dying of heart attacks. And in many cases, they're athletes. Some of the best shaped people in the world. I'm going to show you some stats on athletes dying in the last year. 922 athletes have died during sport competition since worldwide vaccinations began due to heart inflammation and heart issues, stroke, heart attack, unprecedented levels. Here's the Florida Surgeon General telling you what they found out.
Dr. Latipo, did the senior management of Twitter, did any of these social media oligarchs talk to you now? Did anybody reach out to you and ask you for the backup analytics, to ask you about your study, to ask you about anything before they took you down, sir?
Certainly, they didn't reach out to me personally. I guess in theory, maybe they reached out to the office, but I've heard no.
So Twitter took down the post from the Florida Department of Health.
You know, this whole, I mean, it is really almost criminal, really, in terms of how much disregard they have for human rights. That, and I'm not talking just about Twitter, but this whole body that thinks it's okay to crush the voices of others because you don't like their message. Here's a message that, this is not a message that is in our interests or in someone else's interest. This is a message in terms of the data, the information that we were providing. It's a message for people, for humanity, so that people can make informed decisions. You want to do more research? Terrific. You think you've already seen enough evidence and you think our methods are persuasive to you, that you believe that our results are correct? Terrific. Like, humans, people get to make those choices, but this body of tech and other forces that come in and silence people, they don't think human beings have the right to have free access to information that they don't want them to have access to.
And that's a key point. So Twitter censored the original post. Then there was so much pushback. I mean, they were getting blasted for taking down the press release. But we're going to talk about this in the next segment too, when we talk about what happened with PayPal trying to fine users and take your money for what they deem to be misinformation. But this is a serious problem. We have big tech, elites, mainstream media people are deciding that they are the ones who are going to make the decisions of what is and what isn't misinformation. That's not how this works. Okay? That's not how this works. And right now, we clearly have a lot of evidence to believe that our government, not just our government, governments around the world, because we just saw the European Parliament, European Union Parliament, that government leaders around the world are hiding information about these vaccines while people are simultaneously being told, you need to get these to travel, you need to get these to work, and you need to get these to save the people around you. So they're telling people to get these vaccines. In many cases, in some places, they're still encouraging toddlers to get vaccines. And they know that there are risks and side effects and serious dangers associated with these vaccines that they are not telling the public about. And that is not you're not giving the public the full information, right? People have the right to make an informed decision. They should not be giving part of the story, led to believe one thing. You have to present them with all the facts. If you are hiding the facts, people are not making educated decisions. And it's neglect, and it's, quite frankly, it's a criminal act on behalf of our government leaders. And I don't see many Republicans speaking up about this. How many Republicans have you seen on Twitter, on television, talking about this? Tucker Carlson's talking about it, but Tucker Carlson hasn't been elected. Where are the Republicans who are asking us to give them their votes, to give them control of Congress to fight on our behalf? It is many of their constituents who have been fired from their jobs, told that they can't see family members, told that they can't travel because they're not vaccinated, because some people just don't want to take the risk. And now we know that there's good reason for people to not want to be vaccinated. And I'm not saying people shouldn't get vaccinated. I'm saying people have the right to know the full side effects, the full story, the benefits of being vaccinated and the cons of being vaccinated. But if you're hiding the cons, people are only making the decision on the benefits, right? You have to give somebody the full story for them to make an informed decision. But right now we have politicians and corporations deciding that they're going to hide the full story. And this goes all the way back to when COVID lockdowns first began, especially in a state like California where you had Gavin Newsom. They were beating us over the head with the science, the science, the science. You must follow the science. But they never wanted to tell us what the science was. They said, it's the science, trust us. But they were unwilling to show us the science. If it was so concrete and they were correct, why were they scared to show it to us? Why did Gavin Newsom actually say, well, I can't show you the science because it's too complicated and people would misunderstand it? It's not that they would misunderstand it. It's that they would find things that they wouldn't like and it would make them question the decisions you were making. Something is not science because the government or some guy in a chair at Twitter says it's science. And science isn't always 100% accurate. Science evolves and adapts with the more we learn. That's one of the great things about science, right? Something can be a scientific fact one day and then proven to be false the next. But we usually don't hide that information. And why are we doing this? Why? Oh, I have some reasons why. Go look at the donations being made to politicians. Pfizer, Moderna, Big Pharma. Politicians get their money funneled into their campaigns. Right now, Pfizer and Moderna are living the good life because they're getting blank checks from the government for all these boosters and these vaccines. And nobody wants the gravy train to stop. And nobody wants to take responsibility and now say, listen, I misspoke. I lied to you. Because basically that's what they did. They lied to us. They told us they had all the information when they know they didn't. And nobody wants to come forward and come clean and take that responsibility. That's what leaders do, though. Leaders are willing to accept that they were wrong, tell you that they were wrong. And if they misled us in such a nefarious way, like right here, I mean, people are dying. They have to be willing to accept the consequences of their deceit. And unless we get leaders that are willing to step up and question this, we may never get the full story behind this. How many more people are going to die before our leaders or anyone that represents us stands up and says, enough is enough, I want the truth, the public deserves the truth, and fights for it? Let's look at another thing the Florida Surgeon General had to say about it.
So yes. I ask people sometimes who are still, hemming and hawing about this, if this vaccine, if it had been known 2 years ago or so that this vaccine would increase cardiac deaths in young men by 84%, would they have approved it? The obvious answer is no, you would never give something to someone who was young and healthy and increase their risk of dying from sudden cardiac death by 84%. But people are often, their response is, well, I don't know, COVID's pretty bad. Yes, COVID can be terrible, but we don't give people medications that kill them.
There's a couple things in there he said are cute. One, COVID is bad. We don't give people medications, though, that are going to kill them. Would you give somebody a pill that's going to make their situation worse? No. You want to give them medication that's actually going to help them, not that's going to kill them. And in this case, the people that are having the worst side effects of the vaccine in terms of myocarditis and heart inflammation, they are younger people. We're talking about 15 to 39, 40-year-old men, okay, whose relative risk from dying of COVID is small or non-existent to begin with, right? Not many teenagers are dying from COVID. That's not me being a denier or a liar. That's the truth. The younger you are, the less likely you are to have a severe case of COVID and die. That's not true for everyone, but it's overwhelmingly true. So we're already forcing these people to take a vaccine that's not really offering them enough benefit, right? And at the same time, we're hiding the potential side effects. You don't think these companies know that there's a link between all these myocarditis cases, heart inflammation, strokes, heart attacks, with the vaccine? They do know because now they're having advertisements about it. There's a Pfizer advertisement out there talking about if your kid is experiencing chest pain, myocarditis is something you should get him looked at. They know there's a link, but they're still hiding it, and this is criminal. If the true nature of this cover-up ever becomes known, this could go down as one of the biggest scandals in modern human history. For what? like I said, what are we doing this for? So politicians can get political donations and Big Pharma can continue racking in the money, and so we can give people a false sense of security? I said I was going to show you some stats about, there's a website called Good Sciencing, and I want to show you it because it's pretty good. They have been following this for a while now, since the vaccines have gone mainstream. There have been 1,354 athlete cardiac arrests since worldwide vaccination began. 922 of these people have died. And you could say, oh, it's bullcrap, it's just some fringe group. They actually, in their study, they list everyone. All these people. Example, Jamie Harper, footballer, collapsed. Tyler Erickson, 17 years old, USA in Florida. Student and golfer went to the golf course to practice but suffered cardiac arrest. His parents found him slumped on the floorboard at a golf cart. Just 2 days before his 18th birthday, he died. They have all the names, the result, the month, the date. And one of the things they found that is startling, okay, because I want to show you this chart. So the International Olympic Committee in Switzerland studied documents from international data banks from 1966 to 2004. Okay, so the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, 1966 to 2004. During those years, they found 1,101 sudden deaths in athletes under 35 years of age, an average of 29 athletes per year. The sports with the highest incidence were soccer and basketball, obviously higher cardiovascular intensity sports. So that was 29 deaths a year from 1966 to 2004. A study by Marin on sudden death in U.S. athletes that took place from 1980 to 2006 in 38 sports identified 1,866 deaths of athletes with cardiac disease with a prevalence of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Okay? And from 2005 to 2006, it was an average of 66 deaths per year. 82% occurred during competition or training. Here's where things get crazy. This year, in January alone of 2022, there were 89 athletes died, 120 incidents, 89 deaths in January alone. In December, it was 125 incidents with 90 deaths. March, 93 people died in March, athletes. Dropped dead from heart failure, myocarditis, stroke, things related to heart issues. Meanwhile, from 1966 to 2004, it was 29 athletes per year. Look at the totals in this chart for 2022 alone. These are some, and a lot of these are professional athletes. Professional athletes. These are some of the best people in the best shape in the world. Healthy, vibrant athletes dropping dead from heart attacks. This is not normal. We cannot pretend this is normal. And if our political leaders are going to continue covering this up, and if the media and big tech are going to censor anyone, even surgeon generals who sound the alarm, this is a criminal act of epic proportions. And people must be held accountable. And I am calling on the Republican Party and our leaders in Congress to go to bat, to stop worrying about negative press, and to prove to us that you have the guts to do what it takes to lead us. If you want us to give you control of the House and the Senate, these are the type of issues you need to speak up about. People are dying. Teenagers are dying. And if you don't have the guts to take a stand on this and demand answers and transparency, then you don't deserve to lead. And we deserve leaders who do have the guts to do this. I mean, look at this video. I want to show you this video of collapsing athletes because this is crazy. Well, let me show you this video. This is a mother. Her 14-year-old daughter. This is a woman who was one of the first to get the vaccine. 14-year-old son developed myocarditis after getting the COVID vaccine, and nobody cared. She admits, here, watch the video.
So shortly after the first COVID vaccines came out and were administered, people started reporting weird side effects, but they were immediately shouted down and called science deniers. And then data emerged, actual data, showing that the vaccine appeared to cause an increased risk of heart inflammation, very serious heart inflammation called myocarditis. And then researchers in Israel got even closer to the truth and found, quote, a probable link between receiving the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine and the appearance of myocarditis among men aged 16 to 30. But no one seemed to care. People were being very hurt, killed, but the vaccines were never halted or slowed down. And as a result, many young people may have developed very serious, debilitating heart problems. Emily Achiniaka says that her 14-year-old son is one of these. She's a mother. Her son developed myocarditis after taking the shot. Emily joins us. Emily, I appreciate your coming on, and I know that there's quite a bit of pressure not to talk about this, so we're grateful that you're willing to. Tell us your son's experience, if you would.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Following his second dose, he woke up in the middle of the night with chest pain. We had known that this was a possibility, just hearing signals out of Israel. So immediately took him to the emergency room where his troponin was elevated, his EKG was abnormal, and long story short, he was admitted to the acute cardiac floor. Scariest moments of my life, of course. His troponin continued to increase as we were during our stay. So he stayed 4 days and then had months of inactivity and follow-ups with different specialists, and it's been life-altering for us.
Yeah, well, it's the nightmare, considering 14-year-old boys don't typically have heart problems, and your son was healthy, I believe, before taking this vaccine. So we have an entire medical establishment designed to help people like you. What was the reaction that you got when you said, my son had his heart damaged by a COVID vaccine?
You're a liar, or you're censored on Twitter. I don't know if you have the pictures of my son, but I was very pro-vaccination, yes. One of the first out of the gate. And then I was ostracized because my son was injured, of no fault of my own. And it's been an eye-opening experience.
I mean, I'll share a personal story. I can't say for sure, but I had an adverse reaction when I got my second dose. I had to go to the emergency room. I don't know if it was heart inflammation. They didn't test me for that. This was early on when the vaccines were still rolling out, so they did not know the connection between myocarditis. But I had a severe reaction, waking up, had to go to the emergency room. And I don't want to get boosted because I had that experience and I'm scared what could happen. And now knowing what's going on with these heart issues, I really would not want to get boosted until I know the truth. But if our government is not going to tell us the truth, and they're only going to give us one side of the story because that is the side that they have they have decided is what they're going to stick with, then people need to say enough's enough. And like I said, I'm calling on Republican leaders who want control of the House and the Senate to man up and speak up and prove to us you deserve it and say, we need to know the truth about this. Stop worrying about your campaign account and the money coming in from big tech, from big pharma and big tech lobbying firms, and start worrying about your constituents and their lives. Put their lives first. Stop worrying about re-election, put their lives first, and demand the truth and answers come out. And now we're going to pivot in because this is going to flow into what happened with the PayPal controversy. So if you, I've been telling people for a while that things are going to get uglier. And Jack Posobiec is one of the best. He always tells you, one of the things he talks about is that it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And so over the weekend, a company that I know very well with, I do sports cards and memorabilia. A lot of my time has been spent using PayPal. I'm very familiar with PayPal. They tried to update their user agreement, okay, over the weekend. Let me show you what they tried to do. In their new user agreement, they sent it out, and they probably didn't think anyone was going to read it, at least as closely as they did. So if you are a seller, PayPal was saying now they had the right under their new acceptable use policy. So if you violate their acceptable use policy, you acknowledge and agree that $25,000 per violation of the acceptable use policy, PayPal will seize from your account as a penalty. Then they went on to update in Part F, if you promote words that are fraudulent or if you promote misinformation. So they added in promote misinformation as a violation of acceptable use policy. And people read this and they said, wait a minute. What is misinformation to PayPal? What we have going on here is alarming. So we have a wonderful thing in our country called the U.S. Constitution. And the U.S. Constitution gives us, because our framers were smart people, the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights were included because the Anti-Federalists, originally they wanted to pass the Constitution without the Bill of Rights. And the Anti-Federalists said, wait a minute. We're not going to take, because they would say, well, we don't need, the Federalists said, you don't need a Bill of Rights. All that is understood, right? The government's never going to do those things. It's all inherently understood. And they said, wait a minute. We just fought a war against Britain, and you're going to ask us to take the government's word for it that they're never going to infringe on our rights? They said, that's a deal breaker. Either we include the Bill of Rights or we're not signing the Constitution. So they gave us the Bill of Rights. One of the most prominent is what? Freedom of speech. Democrats are very smart people, okay? And if you see what's going on with the FBI, Department of Justice, they are smart. These leftists has realized their biggest obstacles to getting done what they needed to get done was the fact that the FBI, right, was not going to allow it. The Department of Justice wouldn't allow nefarious behavior. And corporate America was usually in the tank for Republicans, right? But what they've done is radical leftists have taken over the boards of these corporations. And now the Democratic Party sees an opportunity to get away with censoring people outside of official government action. So now you have big, large corporations who are going to be doing the Democratic Party's bidding. All right? That's what's going on here, because the Democrats know that they could never pass a law. Well, maybe one day they will with the way they're going, trying to take over the government. That's why we really have to get rid of these people. But the courts are going to strike down laws like this. You finding people for quote unquote misinformation under, right? People have freedom of speech. However, it gets dicey for the courts when it's a big corporation or a private company, right? And this is very troubling. So a private company, because the private company is going to say, well, if somebody is unhappy with our philosophy or our policy, nobody's forcing them to use our service. They could simply cancel their account and go elsewhere. But as we saw with social media companies, what happened, right? When Twitter started banning people, they said, well, that's Twitter's job. They can do it. It's a private company. You can go elsewhere. What happens when there's no more elsewheres? Because what happened, right? They kicked Parler out of the App Store. Google is banning Truth Social from the App Store. So these companies have become so powerful that they control the means of disseminating information and access to information that there really aren't, it's hard for people to come up with alternatives. And this is going to get worse and worse. So the Democrats know that the courts are likely going to they're going to struggle with ruling here because it is a private company. And it's actually going to splinter conservatives as well, too, because I have many conservative friends that I talk to about Twitter bans and things say, well, it's a private company. They can do what they want. Democrats know this. That's why this plan is so genius. But that's why it's also so dangerous. What is a web banking company in the business of determining what is and what isn't misinformation and then penalizing people for misinformation? This is the start of something they've been talking about for a long time, social credit scores. This is not the job of a bank to determine if you're spreading misinformation or not. And who determines misinformation? That's another thing. Misinformation isn't being determined based on actual facts and evidence. Misinformation is being determined based on political affiliation. So basically, these lefties that are controlling our government now and controlling these corporations are saying anything that a conservative viewpoint comes out is misinformation and it's radical and it's extreme and it must be censored because it's a threat to people. They did it with the vaccines. Now they're doing it with pretty much everything they disagree with. Abortion rights, right? Transgender rights, everything. Anything you say that goes against what they believe and what they now say is the truth or is the science is you spreading information, misinformation, and you must be censored. And the Democrats know that the way to get around the Bill of Rights is to have these companies do their bidding. This is incredibly dangerous. This is fascism. It's corporate fascism. Big tech, big corporations in collusion with a political party to silence people who disagree with them and have different political viewpoints of them. Putting them on lists, taking their money, taking away their access to information, their access to banking. And so PayPal came out and said this was a mistake. It was never supposed to happen. We didn't mean to have it in there. Bullcrap. Because this isn't the first time PayPal's done it. PayPal CEO, let's look at what he had to say. PayPal CEO earlier this year talked about this policy and what they were doing, how they were struggling with. The difficult part is identifying what's his hatred and what is freedom of speech. Yeah, that is difficult to determine what is misinformation, what is hate speech. But that's not the job of a web bank. Your job is just to facilitate transactions among private individuals. That's your job. Your job isn't to determine who's spreading quote-unquote misinformation and how we're going to penalize them for that. When did that become PayPal's job? Twitter, right? Let's roll back the clock where Twitter was going to penalize people for saying the vaccinated can spread COVID. Well, we learned that the vaccinated could spread COVID. Was there ever an apology for this? So that was deemed misinformation. Now we know it was true. So when determining what is and isn't misinformation is based not on facts, not on science, but on political affiliation and agendas, that's dangerous. That is not really determining misinformation. That's what fascism is all about. So the Democrats want to run around and constantly tell people, you're a fascist, say that person's a fascist, Republicans are fascists, but they themselves are the ones behaving as fascists. And we need to wake up. So earlier too, PayPal did this before. PayPal, the MPs in Britain, PayPal shut down the accounts of the Free Speech Union. So what this Free Speech Union was doing is they were taking donations to help people who were silenced or shut down or ostracized for speaking up against school closures. So this was a group to support parents who fought hard to keep schools open during COVID. And PayPal shut down their account, took their money, because they said it violated their user agreement. And the MPs had the right things. They said this: reasoned two-side debate is essential to a functioning democracy, and there should be no room for censorship by the way of denial of services. So Democrats can scream all day long about defending democracy. We're the defenders of democracy. Republicans are insurrectionists and fascists. Silencing debate, silencing different opinions, getting big corporations and big tech to do your bidding, that is fascism. That is a threat to democracy. That is how the republic ceases to exist. My gripe here, too, is, where are our leaders? Where is Mitch McConnell? Where is Kevin McCarthy? Where is Elise Stefanik? Where is Steve Scalise? Where is Ronna McDaniel? Have they said anything about any of this? Have they demanded answers? Was any of this in their commitment to America, right? No. Sure, the commitment to America does say take on big tech. You tell me this. How is Kevin McCarthy and Republican leadership going to take on big tech when big tech gave them $300,000, over $300,000 in donations alone in Q2? Do you trust that they're going to get to the bottom of this? That they're going to solve this? That they're really going to get to these answers? When they're taking in $300,000 in one quarter from big tech and big corporations and big pharma? Bullcrap. They're bought and paid for. That's why big pharma and big tech is giving them those amounts of money, because they know that nothing's going to be done with those people in leadership positions. That is why this is one of the most pivotal and consequential elections in American history coming up in November. Not only do Republicans have to win, but once we win, we have to demand leaders that are up to the moment that history demands of us. We need new leaders to represent the Republican Party that believe in America First populism, and that believe in doing what's right for the American people, that are not concerned about getting reelected over and over again and earning endless amounts of money in politics, that want to get results and that want to defend their constituents. And Republicans are going to win in November. I am 99.99999% sure that Republicans are going to win control in both chambers. But nothing is going to change without a change in leadership. Our current leaders are bought and paid for by big tech, by China, by big pharma, by lobbyists, by all these other groups. They're bought and paid for. They are not up to the task. They are not up to the moment. So remember that. After these November elections, it's time for to speak up, because if these people were up to the task, they would already be speaking up. They're not speaking up because they're scared of what the electoral consequences, and they're scared of getting crap from the media, from big tech, and from Democrats. But if you're too scared to speak up, then you don't have the guts to get it done when you're in power. People are dying. People are having their money taken away, their livelihoods destroyed, and you are not doing anything. I'm tired of hearing about 1984 talking about we're going to balance the budget, we're going to do tax cuts, we're going to do this. Nobody cares. That means nothing anymore. Talk about the issues that your constituents care about. It's 2022. It's a much different world than when Ronald Reagan was president, than when George Bush won in 2000 and 2004. Times have changed. The party has changed. If you learned anything from Donald Trump's win in 2016, you'd know that the American people want someone like that. They want a fighter. Just because the media is going to talk crap on you, it doesn't mean anything, because American people don't trust the media. They know the media is full of crap. They're actually going to have more respect for Republican leadership and Republican politicians if they speak up. But by continuing to show your cowardice and ignoring the things that we just talked about, you're proving that you don't have what it takes. And there is too much on the line right now for this. And speaking of this, I want to go into the last segment before we take some questions and answers. And when we, and I also want to do my biggest loser, this week's biggest loser. But speaking of these rhinos and these people, let's talk, because it pivots right into this, about Ben Sasse. So Ben Sasse is learning the hard way that all his groveling, all his anti-Trumpness, all his let's go back to the Republican Party of old, did it get him the love that he craved from the left and the media? No. This past week, Ben Sasse announced he was, as you know, for those who don't know, Ben Sasse, Republican congressman, Nebraska, He is stepping down to take the presidency of Florida, the University of Florida. He was one of the Republican senators who voted to impeach, to convict President Trump. He was a notorious thorn in the side of President Trump. For what reasons? He says, oh, moral high ground. It's not the version of conservatism he wants. No, it's because he wanted love from the left. Well, guess what? How did those same leftists who he craved their affection and their love for standing up against him, how'd they treat him when they got the job? Let's look at how they treated him. Let's look at how the students at University of Florida treated Ben Sasse.
Ben Sasse has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Ben Sasse has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Ben Sasse has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Ben Sasse has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho.
They got signs saying he's a bigot, get out of the swamp.
Ben Sasse has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Ben Sasse has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Ben Sasse has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho. Ben Sasse has got to go, hey, hey, ho, ho.
So let me ask you, Senator Sasse, was it worth it? Was stabbing President Trump in the back and helping derail his agenda worth it? Did it get you the long-lasting love and affection of the left that you thought it would? No. This is the thing Republicans don't get. No Republican is safe. It's not just MAGA Republicans. It's every Republican. It's every conservative. That's what the message, that's what the lesson that Ben Sasse should be taking from this, and other Republicans like Mitt Romney, Adam Kinzinger, Dan Crenshaw, David Valadao, all these other idiots need to realize. You are never, they don't like you. They like when you give them a sound clip to make Trump look bad or to make Republicans look stupid, but they're never going to vote for you. They still think you're a bigot. They still think you're a racist. They still think you're the scum of the earth. They still think you're a fascist. Just because you helped them out by embarrassing Donald Trump doesn't mean they think highly of you. They hate conservatives. They want us all gone. They want us all silenced. Anyone with an R next to their name is not safe. Doesn't matter if you're a moderate or not, a Reagan Republican or not, a Bush Republican or not, a Romney Republican. You're not safe. You think the left likes Mitt Romney? No. Mitt Romney would face the same situation. Republicans need to stop thinking that every time they grovel at the left's feet and give them what they want, that they're going to be accepted. Because that's not how it works. They want us all gone. They don't want conservatives. Conservatives are backwards people to them, right? We're people, oh my God, we believe in God. We go to church. We believe in the family, right? We believe in individual liberty, personal rights. We believe that only American citizens should vote. We believe that human life is sacred from conception. We're unacceptable to these people. And by groveling at their feet and giving them what they want, you're not earning their loyalty. I live right near the district of David Valadao. He was one of the Republicans who voted to impeach Donald Trump in the House, thinking that, well, now he's in a new, more Democratic district. Well, I showed them that I could do the right thing. And I stood up for the integrity of the United States and the integrity of our government, and I voted to impeach Donald Trump. And he thinks that they're going to vote for him in November. No, they're not. They're going to say, thank you. You made Trump look bad. They're still going to vote for the Democrat. But now you lost support amongst your own people. So Ben Sasse, your own side hates you, and the left still doesn't love you. Same with Valadao. And I like David. I think David's a good guy. I think he made a bad decision. I think he was led astray by his advisors. He made the wrong choice. But was it worth it? Because now your own side, the voters you need to win in November, your core support, hates your guts. And the left still isn't going to vote for you. They're still not going to want Ben Sasse on their campus. So was it worth it? If Republicans have not learned this lesson by now, they never are. And we have to start understanding the true nature of the enemy we face. The Democrats no longer want an America where it's two parties working together to get things done. They don't want bipartisanship. They want Republicans gone, silenced and gone. That's why they want illegals to vote. That's why they're bending election laws, because they want to come up with, that's why they're pushing ranked choice voting, because they want to come up with ways to get rid of every Republican they can, consolidate their power. That's why they've taken over the FBI. That's why they're raiding the homes of people who pray outside abortion clinics, because they want us all gone. That is a totalitarian mindset. They are the fascists. And Republicans better wise up. And our leaders better start opening their mouths. Because quite frankly, I'm annoyed. I want Republicans to take back the House and Senate in November, but I want them to earn it. And right now, they're not earning it. They're giving us a glimpse of what it's going to be like when they take power. I don't need Lindsey Graham on Sean Hannity telling me he's going to get to the bottom of things. I don't need any more Trey Gowdy telling me, oh, we're going to get them for this one. I don't need any of these people. Jim Jordan saying, I'm going to take on big tech even though I took $300,000 of their money. I don't need toothless hearings so you can send me a clip in a fundraising email. I want results. I want actions. Commit to impeaching Merrick Garland on day one. He has proven he does not have the ability to lead the Department of Justice in the way it was meant to be led. He is using the Department of Justice as Joe Biden and his own personal stormtroopers. Any Republican that has not vowed to get rid of him on day one doesn't deserve your vote. All right, so let's roll into this week's biggest L. I wanted to talk about this new segment. I decided I wanted to pick something on the internet. There's plenty of it. There was a lot today. I was going to change it, but I wanted to go with this one. So NPR, and then we'll do question and answers after this if we got some people still want to ask me any questions. But NPR put this ridiculous story saying how abortion bans are expected to increase birth rates among adolescents whose bodies often aren't built for safely carrying a pregnancy to term. So it's because the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade that more teenagers are going to have babies. And that's why we should have abortions, because teenagers need to be able to have abortions because their bodies aren't physically ready to have babies. First of all, that's not true. Because we know that back in the day when people were living to be 40 years old, people were having babies at 15, 13, 20 years old, and their bodies handled it. How about this, NPR? How about we teach teenagers to act responsibly? This is the same thing that's happening in our classrooms. Let them do whatever they want, have sex with whoever they want, get pregnant, and then say, oh, no worries, you could just have an abortion. That is not how a responsible human being behaves. What values are we teaching our kids? Right? Actions have consequences. This is what drove me crazy in the classroom. It used to be when you didn't turn in your homework, you got a 0. All right? Then you had to tell your parents that you got a 0. And they probably yelled at you. Or you failed the class. And what happened afterwards? You felt like crap. You might have gotten sad. You might have gotten depressed. But you learned a lesson. You said, wait a minute. I don't want to feel that way anymore. I'm going to start doing my work. Most kids woke up and said, I got to start doing my homework. Now, what do we do in schools? We say, oh, you didn't do your homework? Well, give it to me when you can get it to me. I was told if kids could walk out of my test and take it 3 weeks later and come in and say, I want to take that test I never did. After the quarter closed, I had assistant principals telling me to let them take the test. We are raising a generations of irresponsible citizens because we are not teaching our youth that actions have consequences and that they need to act responsibly. Rather than saying, hey, go out and have all the sex you want when you're 15 years old, you can just get an abortion. Why don't we say, hey, listen, let's look at are you ready to have a baby? How are you going to support the baby? You're going to have to drop out of school. It's going to screw up the rest of your life if you can't financially support it at the time. Teenagers shouldn't be having babies, shouldn't be having abortions. Should be going to school, they should be learning, and they should be getting ready to have long, fulfilling lives. We cannot keep telling our nation's youth that every time they mess up, there's no consequence. Nobody wants to hurt kids' feelings. No teacher wants to fail a kid. But this is part of teaching kids lessons. Sometimes you got to get kicked in the pants. Sometimes you got to fall down to learn how to get back up and to learn how to change your behaviors. By making excuses, we are destroying our society. And we could go back and talk about how we really need to get the family structure back in the United States. So that's the week's biggest L, because I thought it was just ridiculous that that's the reason why we should have an abortion. We need to have abortions because we need teenagers to be able to go around having sex and getting abortions. Mind-boggling that people can take this position. So I'd like to see if anybody has any questions. If you got any questions, we could take them now. If not, we'll end the stream and we'll be back next week for another show. We finally got the technical difficulties resolved. So that's a good thing. And I really hope that, we can keep this going. I do want to start having guests on more often. So I'm going to try and resolve that technical difficulty of it. But, if anyone has any questions, I'd love to hear them, to answer them, to entertain you guys. So anyone? Let me make, YouTube, I get the questions. So well, if nobody's got anything, I'll leave you with this. Oh, wait. There we go. I agree, Nancy. All right. Well, I'm going to leave you with this for this weekend. We are living in a very important time in human history. The COVID pandemic allowed our governments around the world to infringe on human rights in such an extreme way and in such a short period of time. And one of the things anyone who knows history understands is that when people give up a right to the government, you very rarely ever get it back. It usually never comes back. And right now, these governments are power hungry. Around the world, we are experiencing a revolution. They're saying it's to defend democracy. What they're really doing is consolidating power, and they are going to be the ones to determine what you do, what you think, what you say, what car you drive, what house you live in, where you send your kids to school, what medications you put in your body. We must become vigilant. We must demand more out of the people that we elect to serve us. It's not enough to just have an R next to your name. I've been telling this for a while. Think about this. How many Republicans, elected Republicans around the country, from the local level all the way to the federal level, stood up for you and your families when there were lockdowns, when you're laid off from your job for not getting a COVID vaccination, when your kids were denied access to the education that they were entitled to? How many Republicans had the guts to speak up publicly and fight back? There weren't many, and there still aren't. And that's why having an R next to your name doesn't necessarily mean you deserve a vote. We are at a point in history where we need leaders, not politicians. People that want to protect those that elected them. So we need to demand more and pay more attention to the people we're voting for. Thank you, Nancy. So I leave you with that. Think about it. Next week we'll be on. I really appreciate getting through this one with no issues. And you guys have a wonderful, blessed evening. Stay vigilant. Keep your heads up. Things are tough right now, but as our favorite president used to say, the best is yet to come.
What's the song that is played where everybody is on the chair, everybody going to the My mind's going blank now. What's happening? What? I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I heading? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. Last night on the television, I was on a telephone rapidly rising and with I don't know. COVID has taken more than 100 years. Look, here's lives reflected in the NHEI. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him in the brigade season. He'll be gotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. NATO's purpose is to defend against aggression. Let me make that near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? What? I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I heading? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. I don't think as the idea that the political coverage of I want to thank and recognize Dr. John Kingersong. I can't get this to focus at all. My mind's going blank now. What's happening? What? I can't remember. I'm gonna lose track. My mind's going blank now. What are you talking about? What the hell's going on here? Where the hell are you? My mind's going blank now. I can't remember. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. What am I doing here? My mind's going blank now. Where am I heading? I keep forgetting I'm president. Where am I? No idea. What's the song that is played where everybody is on the chair?